And after a while, like, I was running around and realized, no, it's not okay. It's looking really weird because certain objects, they just turn on or off with this brightness. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Hi guys, my name is Borodante, and let's check out Unreal Engine 5.3 preview. I wanted to make this real quick video to share my experience with it and some problems I ran into. Of course, it's a preview, but it feels like certain things are changing, and if you're transferring your project, certain things need to be done to get things running the way they used to be running before. So right now, generally my forest is looking just fine, and my enemies are rocking these awesome rings of the Touch of Infinity, by the way, something I had never shown yet. But yeah, Lumen is rendering everything just fine. And generally, I'm really excited for this update because I'm actually trying to make the game run faster right now in Unreal Engine 5. And things aren't going as easy as one may think, specifically because of the trio of Nanite, Lumen, and Virtual Shadow maps introducing a certain steep baseline performance requirements to actually run it at 30 FPS really, but at 60 you gotta have like a desktop 40 series RTX card, I think, because I'm really struggling. Like at 50% resolution it may work, but at full resolution not so much. So pretty much everywhere I'm seeing stuff like performance improvements for masked materials with Nanite, and that is huge to me because right here all of this is masked materials. All these transparent leaves are cut out with masks. So if you're having nature, you're just going all over with transparency masks. And I did an experiment before using homemade models with like thick leaves, actually creating everything like sculpting all the leaves and branches without using any textures, any transparency masks. And at first I felt like it improved performance, but then when I really scaled it up and looked at a dense forest and tried to really run things, I noticed not really, not a lot of difference. One thing that's making it really hard for me to analyze the performance is the fact that I'm running everything on my somewhat thin laptop. It's pretty powerful, but it's really thermally throttled. So at first, if I just start running things, if I just turn on Unreal Engine for the first time, it would be showing me like actually 60 plus 70 FPS in the scene. But after a while, I'll be like under 30. And that's like really confusing me a lot. But yeah, these masked materials in Nanite promising about 20% speed improvement, maybe in the final version, I don't know. I'm not seeing too much of a difference so far. Now next right here we have Lumen. I remember there's some hardware ray tracing optimizations, something you better use in Lumen anyway, so I guess that's also something to be hyped about. But yeah, again, the performance is not really improved so far for me in this preview. They added this like the ability to add multiple bounces of reflections and inside of the reflections, so the reflected objects wouldn't appear black if they're supposed to be reflective as well. That's something for high-end graphics kind of thing. It's not for game development anyway. And by the way, Nanite, another cool thing they introduced is this support for explicit tangents. Apparently the kind of thing that it's like pretty like nerdy to me. I don't really understand what the explicit tangents are about, and it touches a lot of under the hood way of how Nanite is handling things. But apparently, like, if you have a very high poly mesh, you don't need these. Everything will look cool. But if you want to use Nanite with something low poly, so for games, it may run into an issue where things will be imprecise like this, like normals will be messed up a bit because there's not enough data to interpolate well without these explicit tangents. And so it's making game-ready, low-poly objects work well with Nanite, which is great. Apparently it has a little bit of like memory and disk footprint cost, but I guess if you have a low poly mesh, it's probably not a big deal. All of this makes sense, like low poly meshes with nanite. It totally makes sense to use those because the main thing with nanite is not that it can like show millions of polygons. It's really the fact that you can just forget about levels of detail. So you can just use one nicely modeled, clean, game-ready mesh and just have that one version, and it will nicely show with no pop-ins or anything at any distance. So that's really cool, and it's good to have it looking right in the future version of Unreal. Sparse volume textures and all that, that's not something you can use in the game. Same as Path Tracer, all of this is for high-end graphics. Substrate is this new material that was introduced in 5.2. I haven't even tried it yet, ever. I haven't turned it on at all. It's kind of like the next step after PBR materials. That's the way they introduce it. And what it does is it lets you have this physically based material, but also it can layer things on top. Like have this car material with this sparkly thing underneath that's like below the coating layer. I don't know what these things are called, but you know, it's like a layered material. And on top of that, you can add a layer of mud or dust, and it will be really rendering a bit differently, especially at the edges of an object. You can see how the dust is really sitting on top of the rest of the material, which is kind of cool. I'm not sure how it's exactly different. I guess you really need to try it to understand it better. Why these layers are any different from, you know, just layering a PBR material. But I guess it's just the way things are blended on top in the final pixels. So it's not all just, you know, the same roughness map in the end. It's actual separate, really separate roughness maps. When the pixel is traced on the surface of the object, that's how things get really separated and looking like it's truly a separate layer of like dust from the rest of the material or something. But yeah, again, that's not really something for performance, but yeah, Substrate is, it seems to be a cool thing for like very high-end stuff. I would say, not really for games. But maybe, like, I have yet to try if it really scales well. What if you use, like, low-resolution substrate material? Is it too heavy to use it in a game at all? Yeah, Virtual Shadows had some performance improvements, bug fixes, kind of stuff like that. So not too much of a stuff that's really gonna change a lot. But what they did was Virtual Shadows are now not preview, beta, or experimental, whatever they were called. Now they're like just the feature you actually can use. Officially production ready, I guess. Oh yeah, something about supporting nanite cool distance for Virtual Shadows. So they actually respect this cool distance, and apparently that will remove certain large impact on performance if the content was tuned for heavy cooling, which is not the case in my situation, by the way. But yeah, you can say that like Virtual Shadows won't be casting somewhere where they're totally not needed anyway. Something about like nanite cooling, by the way, I wanted to show you guys. Like, this is the big deal about the way I'm approaching my optimization of the game. This flamey mess right here is something that's like, if you're seeing these super bright yellow colors, that's why your game is lagging. So if you go to this nanite visualization tab, and in here you have this overdraw. Overdraw, it means nanite wasn't able to cool a bunch of surfaces that are behind each other. So one pixel is shooting and it has to consider the surface of this stone, then the surface of the leaf, then the leaf behind it, and the leaf behind it, and the leaf behind it, and so on. So it wasn't able to remove, like not consider the rest of the leaves behind the way it did behind the stone right here. So if I'm moving the camera around, you can see that in the middle of the stone, objects are being cooled. This is cooling, like it doesn't have to think about these objects right here. But at a certain distance, it starts to introducing them, like it's cooling as much as it can, but not everything can be cooled. And the bigger the object, the more you can cool away. And it's especially cool looking inside of this really awesome hut I modeled right here in Unreal. Like, you can see how when you look outside at the trees, the cooling is really in action here, so you're only rendering stuff. Not just rendering, it's like Nanite has to think about objects, analyzing what's in front and what's behind, and projecting their textures and something like that, only within this range, so it's understanding that all of this is covered away. But the problem with the leaves is that they're so tiny that this radius of fading in behind the stone is not even touching a single leaf. Like, they're all completely transparent to a nanite, so it's like seeing the whole forest like an X-ray, and that's why it's getting laggy. And I was hoping that when they said that this like optimization for masked materials and specifically mentioned foliage, I was thinking maybe like they would improve this kind of cooling behind masked materials. I don't know, maybe in 5.2 I wouldn't be able to even see this, like a masked material maybe at all is having a hard time to cool away anything. So this right there, that I was able to cool pretty much the whole forest behind one leaf, is kind of cool, but I feel like it's not necessarily new. Okay, I just actually checked out the difference in this overdraw view of Nanite in 5.3 versus 5.2. And it's very interesting because for some reason 5.2 was actually not that flamey at all. I don't know, either overdraw became a lot worse in 5.3, which I doubt. It's more likely that the overdraw view settings were tweaked so like they would show up as a much bigger deal, which makes sense because this is pretty slow. And yeah, in 5.2, same kind of forest, not a big deal, you know, pretty cold colors here. So yeah, maybe worth looking into it more in terms of the difference between 5.2 and 5.3, but also probably should wait for the preview number 2 or something like that for 5.3, because right now, really not too big of a difference in performance or anything. And yeah, if we talk about specifically the cooling behind like one leaf or anything, like in 5.3 we have this kind of very stable and specific cooling. In 5.2, actually, things are way more insane, so I guess that's where things were improved a lot or something. Like, this really doesn't feel like proper stable cooling going on at all. It's like completely insane. So yeah, you can say that is a progress for sure, but I don't know if that's a progress in visualization of it or in actual cooling, so there's that. But yeah, like the fact that there's this like blooming radius that's going behind the object is making it a big problem for nanites to cool foliage like this. So that's why we're looking right here, we're seeing only these leaves in front of us, but really they're all being processed by nanite, like a huge amount of them. So yeah, that's one big issue, and what I ended up realizing that I need to, you know, calm my ambitions a little bit in terms of not like making the forest smaller, nothing like that. You just need to understand, like, you only need to show the actual forest to the player where the player is. Everything else in the distance can be simplified. And just because I'm using nanite, it doesn't mean that, you know, we can do whatever we want. We still need to somehow utilize certain levels of detail. And I have yet to experiment with that, like more, but right now what I started with, first of all, you see cooling distance for objects, so smaller objects cool away faster. I implemented this using the procedural content generation. All of this is just one object, like one actor, but it has a bunch of components. And in here, when you're generating, like spawning objects, you can select all these static meshes that will be thrown around in the points that you generated. And in here, there's a bunch of cooling options for each object. So you can specify exactly where each object cools away, so it disappears at a certain distance. It can actually disappear when it's too close to the camera as well, so it can appear at a certain distance. And that's where simplified versions of objects come in. So right now, like, 10,000 centimeters away, so 100 meters away. I don't know what is this, small bushes, right? So the ones that are disappearing right here. These small bushes, they disappear at 10,000, because if I make it any shorter, it will be like, you know, sometimes just disappearing too quickly. I could make it like 8,000, but the point is, it still needs to disappear quite far away, pretty much when it's completely occluded anyway. But what I can do instead is make them cool away at, say, 2,000 centimeters, so just 20 meters away, and then replace them, so a different spawner or a different object right next to it would be the same bush, but the imposter LOD, like the latest LOD where it's like a flat object. Or maybe a much simpler one, but I feel like much simpler one would still have a bunch of overlaying polygons, so it's not really gonna make things a lot easier for Nanite. An imposter is really what is going to make things easier for Nanite. So I'm thinking like at a certain distance, replacing objects with imposters will really lower the amount of these overlapping things, at least at a bigger distance. So that's one thing to do it. Another thing right here, I'm using this, I'm building a path, right? And so the whole area in here is supposed to be filled with a forest. And only this meadow area is cutting away like a bald spot, right? And then the path is also removing all the trees around, so John could walk there. But what I also do is at like 2,000 centimeters away, so 20 meters away, I guess. Yeah, this is kind of 20 meters away. I just remove everything at the radius of 20 meters, because John is never even supposed to go here anyway. Like, there will be like really dense blocking bushes in there. It won't look as weird, like this won't be blank as well. This will look more like this, but in here it will be like much denser, something like a very no way through wild forest kind of situation at a certain area of the game. In another area there will be very rare trees where you can go wherever you want, but generally like I want this more of a linear feeling, like you are only capable to go where you can go, so you're in this survival mode. I want the game to go like this, and this type of optimization is taking advantage of this kind of narrative approach. So yeah, the first thing I did right here is I removed a whole bunch of, like, I don't know, thousands and thousands of trees where John will never even see those. So that's good. But yeah, imposters will be another thing that will be really cool to experiment with. So that's how I'm planning to tone things down in terms of these overdraws in Nanite. But yeah, overall, like, things are pretty stable. I feel like noticeably less dips. I had these really strong dips at any moment when I start playing. Like, right now we have like 25 FPS. This is like kind of full resolution or something. Without the flashlight, it will be a bit closer to 30. But it would have these really strong dips, like going down to like 7 FPS and then going back within like several seconds, like 3-4 seconds, and doing it like several times in a row, like in waves. I don't know what exactly is happening. VRAM running out or something. Right now things are much better, specifically in 5.3, not after I removed a bunch of the forest. But like 5.3 made things a bit lighter. And yeah, by the way, I could, and I can show you guys right now, I can easily remove these trees right here if I add a tag to the hut and call it PCG Big Objects. And now if I update the forest, it will disappear around this big object, which is the point of this thing. But yeah, there's more cool things in this future update. Again, this is just the very first preview. It's really unstable, and let me guys show you how unstable it is. All of these are dead saves of my project, and these are kinda live. And anytime I update something, like with this thing where I remove the forest around the hut, right now I saved the project. If I'll try to reopen it, it is dead. It's already dead. It's just, it doesn't know it yet. Seriously, project's getting corrupted right now in 5.3 preview. So yeah, all of this is so, like, I'm working just in the copies for 5.3, and the 5.2 version is sitting here safe. But yeah, a lot of things updated. Nanite landscape, I don't know why it's introduced here as a new thing and people being excited. I totally had a nanite landscape in 5.1, I think. That's where they actually introduced it. But maybe they improved something, like made it better. But again, like, I haven't noticed any performance improvements or anything. Of course, many things like still need to wait for the final version to come out. And even then, if you really want to know if there's performance improvements, you better start with like a clean level at least, or even a clean project, just to make sure. Of course, they do a lot when they transfer to a new project automatically. Yeah, another cool thing I'm kind of excited about, like this whole cloth stuff updated. Yeah, some kind of cloth editor. I haven't even noticed that. It's kind of cool. Looks like Marvelous Designer here. But this machine learning cloth simulation, which is kind of cool. It's doing certain poses. You need to import poses with wrinkles, and then it's looking at them, and then it's just repeating that in real time with a very low cost, without actual simulation, because you just machine learn that stuff, which is kind of cool. Same thing they did for like muscle deformations, but for that you need to have a character rigged with muscles in Maya specifically. Yeah, a whole bunch of other stuff is improved. I like the new way they revamped modeling in here. This is looking pretty different now. Some people highlight the new draw spline thing, which is really cool. You can quickly create splines, because with procedural content generation you use these a lot, and yeah, you can easily make it a loop, and you can throw a tag on it real quick and generate any shape you want. But yeah, now about one issue I ran into when I just opened this project in 5.3 for the first time. So this right here is the very first version, and it's looking quite different. There's actually barely any difference in the actual settings. I think I made the fog a bit stronger later, but overall this is supposed to be looking the same. But then I opened it in 5.3 and everything is very vibrant and kind of flat. And they did mention some kind of optimization of lumen. I'm like, is this like some kind of scaling that it can tone things down to make things easier or something like that? And after a while, like, I was running around and realized, no, it's not okay. It's looking really weird, because certain objects, they just turn on or off with this brightness. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So after a while, I just kind of figured it out and kind of realized what's going on. So what's happening is, right now this is like overcast weather I'm having, which means I still have the sun, but there's these thick even clouds in here that are blocking the sun completely. Because there's the sun up there, even though it's completely blocked, so there shouldn't be any, you know, impact on that. Just the actual clouds and the sky dome is supposed to be lighting things up, like skylight right here. Instead, lumen is still reacting to direct sun rays, even though they're not here. So what we're seeing here is the reflected bouncing light from the sunlight without the actual sunlight present. So if I remove the volumetric cloud, this is looking like it's looking much brighter with the direct light with no shadows, because why would I have them turned on if everything's blocked by the clouds? But the actual lumen scene, the brightness of lumen, will probably stay the same. Actually, let's literally check it out. So lumen scene, this is what it looks like. That's what made me kind of suspicious, like, why is the ground that bright? It never looked like that in the 5.2. Lumen scene is not supposed to be that bright. It's usually more on the dark side. So yeah, if I remove volumetric clouds, if anything, it's getting darker, which makes no sense, right? It's actually brighter when volumetric clouds are on. Maybe because it's like adding the volumetric clouds ambience to the lumen, so it all looks kind of like upside down. But anyway, what's really fun is that even though there's literally zero direct sunlight, because you're not seeing a single sharp shadow here, and I even have shadows turned off, so if you cast shadows, Lumen starts reacting to it by creating these super soft shadows from the top. So it looks kind of cool, but it's still broken because all the bushes that are supposed to be in the direct sunlight, they're still like flatly lit. They're like really bright everywhere. It's looking wrong. And things are still very oversaturated. They're so saturated as if they're reacting to a very bright light. So point is, cast shadows should be off, but what you gotta do, like if you're going for a completely overcast weather, and I hope this is just a temporary fix for the preview, but indirect lighting intensity should be 0 on the sunlight. And when you do that, you finally completely remove the actual direct sunlight impact on Lumen. So now you're just having the actual cloudy sky lighting up the forest. And I feel like this is definitely kind of a bug because it should be done automatically. If there's no direct sun rays, they shouldn't bounce around in the leaves in the Lumen scene. So yeah, it took me a moment to figure it out, but that's what you do to bring the scene back to its normal look, the way it should be in the overcast weather. And to me it was like pretty obvious because I have like purely, overcast weather and the scene to really test it on. But I feel like even if you have like a sunny weather with some parts of it blocked by something big or variable clouds, like sometimes it's cloudy, sometimes it's not, it will still look wrong in the shadows of those rare clouds. So in case of variable cloudiness, you can't even make it work right because it's either always on or always off kind of situation between Lumen and the sunlight. So yeah, after I did this, it's kind of back to normal, but again, can't tell if there is a lot of performance improvement. And another reason to that is that I can't test it outside of the editor. I can only like play right here. Oh yeah, this version also I had to there's some updates to the nodes in procedural content generation. That's why it doesn't react to my meadow curves. They're supposed to introduce a bunch of bold spots. They're not bold. So yeah, there's a whole lot of details to walk among here. Anyway, the point is I can't build the project again. Even though I have everything installed properly and 5.2 can totally do it, this version runs into some kind of bug. And what's interesting, I know it's literally a bug because even standalone game, where it would just launch it right now in a separate window, which would be another way to at least somehow see the performance closer to a real standalone game. This also doesn't work. It's totally like it runs into an error, so that's not gonna work as well right now in this preview. So no way to truly run a clean test on a standalone window of the game. But yeah, overall it's been fun figuring things out. Hope I'll see more performance improvements in the future, especially when this version comes out as a final build. But yeah, overall the rendering is pretty nice right now. They do change things. I can see how things improve, and my this new version of enemies are looking pretty dope here. So yeah, this is it. Let me know what you guys think. What do you know, or have you tried yourself the 5.3 preview? What do you know about the performance improvements potential and stuff like that? How to make Nanite work better, if you especially had some kind of practical experience with it. But yeah, I'll leave you guys right here. Let me know what you all think, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye! You guys want to see another cool thing? I don't think I ever tried this in 5.3, but yeah, this is what Lumen does if you had a bright light in a room like this, and then you turn it off. This bright ambience, it just stays there forever. So right now I relaunched the game, and I'll enter it with the flashlight, with all these terrible temporal shadows all over the place. It's kind of better, but with like the brighter the walls, like the more white they are, the harder it is for Lumen to get rid of this ambience. It's still kind of yellow in there. It's kind of weird. Sometimes, especially if it's dark outside of this hut, it will just stay there forever, pretty bright.